What's going on, everybody? Kalipus Tech here, coming back at you with another video. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at the Samsung Galaxy A24 4G and going over whether or not it's a good phone to buy in late 2023. Now, as always, if you end up wanting to learn more about this phone, be sure to check out the description, where I am linking to several other videos about it, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But with that being said, let's get into it. So with the Samsung Galaxy A24 4G, we're getting a decently large 6.5-inch 90Hz Super AMOLED display with a 1080p resolution, a PPI of 396, and a 19.5:9 aspect ratio. So definitely a great display here. At 6.5 inches, it's not the largest display out there, but at this point in 2023, pretty much every phone is around the same general size, and I would say it is decently large. So with a display like this, if you're doing stuff like maybe browsing the web, reading, stuff like that, you will get a pretty good experience. Things are going to be pretty easy to see, so really no complaints here. Also keep in mind, with a 19.5:9 aspect ratio, we are getting a pretty tall, narrow form factor here. So when you're doing stuff like maybe vertically scrolling through a social media feed, you'll be able to fit a good amount of content on the screen without having to scroll too much. And if you're doing something in landscape mode, like looking at photos or watching videos, you are going to get a nice immersive experience, and things are going to look a bit more cinematic. In addition to the size and dimensions, the image quality is really good too. With the 1080p resolution, we are of course getting a nice, sharp, crisp image. So this phone is ideal for stuff like watching videos and things like that, where the image quality is a bit more important. With a 90Hz refresh rate, the movement on the screen is a bit faster and smoother, making the phone feel a bit more premium to use. And then with the Super AMOLED, this is probably my favorite thing about the display here, but it is going to make the colors a lot richer and more vivid. The display itself is brighter in general, and the viewing angles are really good too. So if you're outside in the sun, for example, or really in any kind of bright area, compared to your standard LCD type display, this display is a lot easier to see. So in general, if you're looking for an affordable 4G phone, and you want a really nice display for consuming content, the Samsung Galaxy A24 4G will be a great choice. Now for storage with this phone, we are getting 128GB of internal storage with microSD card expansion, so plenty of storage here. Sure, on one hand, if you're really a power user and you have maybe lots of apps and games and stuff like that, you might want to get something that has 256, but considering the actual niche of this phone, most people using their devices like that are probably not going to be looking for a phone like this anyway. So for the average user, I do think 128GB, even at this point in 2023, is going to be plenty of storage. And if you have maybe lots of photos and videos, for example, again, this phone does support microSD card expansion, so this definitely will make a difference too. For security features, the Samsung Galaxy A24 4G does have Face Unlock, as well as a fingerprint scanner right here on the power key. So definitely a great spot for a fingerprint scanner, but real quick, let's give it a try. There we go, one more time. And there we go. So real fast and responsive, no issues at all. And again, this phone does have Face Unlock too, and while this is definitely not rare by any means, it is always nice to get both options. Now taking a look at the camera setup here, with the Samsung Galaxy A24 4G, up front, we got a 13 megapixel selfie camera, kinda got this not water drop notch kinda look. On one hand, it's obviously not like a hole punch, but at the same time, compared to your classic water drop notch selfie camera, I feel like this design looks a bit better. Then on the back, we get a triple camera setup with a 50 megapixel main camera, a 5 megapixel ultra wide camera, and a 2 megapixel macro camera. And then for video, this phone does have a max recording quality of 1080p in both the rear and front cameras. So unfortunately no 4K here, but considering the price range of this phone, I'm not really surprised. That being said though, keep in mind, if you are really recording a lot of videos and you do want that higher resolution, there are options around this general price range. Especially if you're in the US, carriers have all kinds of deals on much higher end phones than this for around the same prices you can get this factory unlocked. And even some unlocked phones like the Google Pixel 6a or the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE. Sure, they're not the newest phones, but at the same time, in the US you can get them for around $200 factory unlocked on Amazon. Whereas with the A24 4G, factory unlocked, this phone is around $185. And while it does have the advantage of being a pretty much brand new phone, again, if you really are looking for something that can record 4K videos, just keep in mind, there are other options out there. But aside from that, for the rest of the camera setup, I do think it is really good here. We are getting both an ultra-wide camera and a macro camera, which I do appreciate. In fact, for comparison, at full price, the Samsung Galaxy A14 5G is going for around $199, so a little bit more than this phone, and that phone doesn't have an ultra-wide camera, so again, definitely glad to see one here. Now to give you an idea of what the photo quality actually looks like, here's some pictures taken with the Samsung Galaxy A24 4G. So overall, definitely great photos here. Compared to most phones available at this point in late 2023, at least around this general $200 or less price range, I do think this phone is actually among the better choices. Sure, it's not exceptionally better than something like a Samsung Galaxy A14 5G or the Motorola Moto G Stylus 2023, but at the same time, it does have better features than most of those phones, because again, a lot of more entry-level devices don't have ultra-wide cameras for whatever reason, and I do think the photo quality as far as the details and colors and everything do look really good here. So in general, if you're looking for a more affordable phone, but you still really want the ability to take a nice photo when you need to, and maybe you want a wider variety of features too, but you don't necessarily need the most fancy camera out there, or stuff like 4K video recording, then in that case, for the average user, I do think the camera here will be plenty good enough. For the RAM and processor, with the Samsung Galaxy A24 4G, we're getting 4GB of RAM with the MediaTek Helio G99 processor. Now, I will say, on one hand, while obviously as the name implies, this is not a 5G phone, despite this, the performance we're getting here is actually really good. In fact, for that matter, compared to a lot of entry-level 5G phones, the A24 4G is pretty much just as fast, if not faster, which I was really not expecting. So on one hand, if you're gonna be on your phone like all day doing stuff like high performance mobile gaming, video editing, things like that, you are going to want to get something a bit faster and higher end. But at the same time, for casual daily use, if you're doing stuff like web browsing, social media, streaming content like videos and music, and really just using your phone as a phone, for that kind of use, I do think this phone will be perfectly fine. And again, compared to most phones in this general price range, I do think the performance we're getting here is actually even a little bit better. So overall, for what it is, I definitely am impressed here. Now, I ran a benchmark test on this phone using Geekbench 6, and here are the results I got. So what I recommend doing is running this test on your current phone, and then comparing your results to these, and that's going to give you a better idea of whether or not this phone will be a performance upgrade for you. Because of course, depending on what you're coming from, it may or may not actually be. If you're coming from an older but higher end device, then chances are it will be a downgrade. But if you're coming from more of an entry level or a mid-range phone, then it could be a pretty solid upgrade. So it really just depends, but again, really the main takeaway here is that, first of all, this is not a 5G phone. Again, this is the A24 4G. And second of all, despite this, the performance for what it is pretty good. Sure, don't expect it to be anywhere near the performance of like a $1,000 flagship phone, but at the same time, for basic daily activities, I do think it will get the job done for most people. Now for the battery, with the Samsung Galaxy A24 4G, we're getting a 5000 mAh battery that also supports 25 watt fast charging, so definitely a great battery here. With a battery like this, you can expect to get great battery life per charge. So if you're in a situation where maybe you're not always around a charger, but you still have to use your phone all day, this phone will be great for that because most people probably aren't going to have to charge it until at least the end of the day. In my experience, I've left it sitting on a table for literally multiple days, and it still ended up with like 58% left. Granted, sitting around doesn't really drain battery that fast, but the point is the battery life on this phone is definitely good. And then down the road, as the battery degrades, which all batteries do, with this phone, it's going to last quite a bit longer than a much smaller battery. So if you like to get one phone and keep it for a longer time without having to replace it, then this phone will be great for that too. And when it comes to charging speed, keep in mind, first of all, especially for a 4G phone, but really for any kind of affordable device, 25 watt fast charging is pretty good. But despite this, with a 5000 mAh battery, considering this is a really large battery, it might not really feel that fast, but to maximize the actual charging speed, you will need a 25 watt charger, which unfortunately this phone doesn't come with. In fact, it doesn't come with any kind of wall adapter at all, so definitely keep this in mind. For the software, with the A24 4G, we are getting Android 13, so definitely great to see there. And in addition to this, Samsung has really good software support, so with this phone you can expect to get several other major updates in the future. I believe it will be getting Android 14, 15, 16, and 17, so yeah, definitely great there. So if you are planning on keeping your phone for multiple years, and you want the latest version of Android the whole time, then this phone, or really any recent Samsung for that matter, will be a great choice. Also keep in mind, with the A24 4G, we are getting NFC here, so if you like to use tap and pay, keep in mind this phone can use that feature no problem. But in conclusion, is the Samsung Galaxy A24 4G worth buying at this point in late 2023? Now, in general, this kind of depends on your situation and where you're located too. If you're in the US, even though this is a really good phone for what it is, when it comes to the deals US carriers are typically offering, I feel like you can probably do better in most situations, because with a carrier, even if you don't end up getting your phone for free, you can get a phone quite a bit higher end than this for around the same price you can get this phone factory unlocked. Again, keep in mind the A24 4G is going for around $185, so Definitely not that expensive, especially for what we're getting here, but at the same time, if you do want something higher end and you really want to maximize the actual value you're getting for the money, again, there are better options out there. I mean, you can even get something like a Google Pixel 6a or a Samsung Galaxy S21 FE, and granted, those are definitely not the newest phones at this point, but they are still quite a bit higher end, and when it comes to stuff like performance and the camera and things like that, they will outclass this phone by quite a bit. That being said though, of course, not everyone qualifies for carrier deals. There always is some kind of fine print, so I know not every single person looking for a new phone is going to get one of those. So if you are in that situation where you're looking for something factory unlocked for around $200 or less, maybe you don't really care about 5G connectivity, but you still want good performance, a really nice display, a great battery, and a really nice camera setup, then in that case, the A24 4G is definitely worth considering. And then of course, if you're outside the US, this phone will most likely be a lot more worth it for you. So in general, for what it is and what it's really meant for, I do think this is still a great phone, and as more phones come out and the price inevitably ends up going down, I feel like the A24 4G will be even more worth it throughout 2024. Now once again, if you want to learn more about this phone, definitely check out the description, where I am linking to several other videos about it, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it and found it useful, be sure to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to follow Cleepus Tech on Twitter and Instagram. And as always, I will see you in the next video.